Welcome back, you dashingly handsome people. This is the magical and mystical.
And wonderful.
Yes, and wonderful adventures of Gordon. Gordon and the land of the Derms. Today we begin our tale here in Yorkshire, England, where the weather is 80% That's right, no swearing. Where it's basically miserable. Well, the weather usually is, but we love it. The singing birds, rolling hills, and picturesque landscapes make you feel calm, cool, and collected. Imagine in your minds, if you will, a house on the top of a hill with forests and fields all around. This is where our little Gordon, the main character of our story, resides. He has blonde hair and lagoon blue eyes. Oh, and just a little reminder, this is the second epic tale in our series of stories, so if you want to listen to the first, take a look at the magical and mystical.
And wonderful.
Yes, and wonderful adventures of Gordon, Nanan's quilt. That way you will get a more in-depth picture of God and the gang. Anyway, back to the story. Gordon was yet again doing his absolutely most desirable favorite thing in the entire galaxy. Sleeping, of course, when in his dreams he heard a distant bing noise. Gordon stirred awake in his cave-like quilt, and he made an effort to open his sleepy peepers. It really did take an effort for Gord to open his eyes. He had only had 8 hours sleep and liked at least 12, especially on a Saturday. The bing noise became clear as Gordon's groggy head came from the land of slumber into reality. It was the doorbell, and by the sounds of the rhythmic tune it was making, he realized it was his bro, Eam, and probably Wisa at the front door. Eam always did a super-secret doorbell-pushing combo in a continuous way, so God knew who it was. Knowing the dynamic duo were at the door, God threw his quilt to the wall with ferocious energy. If it was anyone else, he would have stayed in bed and waited for them to depart, but for Eam and Wisa, he launched up and scurried across the floor as the floorboards were cold, and so he gave a chilly groan. Ugh. As he approached the top of the stairs, he jumped on the banister rail and slid down backwards, landing with precision at the bottom. Now, to do this, God had practiced this maneuver 1,000,000 times, as he wanted to make sure if there was an emergency he could escape fast. But anyway, the downstairs was carpeted and very welcome to Gordon's bare feet.
That's better.
Striding to the door, God could see the familiar shapes of Wisa and Eam through the frosted glass. Reaching into the bowl on a small table at the side of the door, God rummaged around for the door key and plucked it out. He was so excited, as an adventure always ensued when Wisa and Eam were around. It was just plain fun. Gordon jammed the key into the door and twisted it and opened it. There stood Gimli, a.k.a. Wisa, and the giant, a.k.a. Eam. Now, Gordon called Wisa Gimli, as she was a small lady, and Eam was, well, pretty much a giant, so it's self-explanatory why he called him a giant. Eam stuck his hand out the moment he saw Gordon, and Gordon knew exactly what to do. They did their best bud handshake. We stood at the side smiling, waiting for the high five to end the handshake. After the pair high-fived, they all went into the kitchen. When there was just Gord and Polly in, Eam enjoyed going to see what was in the fridge, and today was no exception. He went over to take a peek.
Do you guys fancy some breakfast? I'm starving.
Oh, God, you read my mind. Let's have a look. What have we got? We can have a full English. Yes, even hash browns. Whis went over to the kettle. She was the tea master and proceeded to get out the cups and begin making freshly brewed cups of tea. God got the knives and forks out. Eam plucked out all the ingredients he could find to make a hearty breakfast. There was streaky bacon, eggs, hash browns, sausage, black pudding, beans, tomato, mushrooms, and bread with butter. That was toasted. You must have it toasted. Yes, sorry, I just like to get things correct. But anyway, Eam gave a short, sharp whistle, and the guys looked over at him. Give me an hand, would you guys? I haven't quite mastered this mechanical arm thing yet. Oh, yes, let me fill you in. I'm very, very sorry. In our last story, Eam was injured and lost his arm in a battle when the evil King Shwebby severed it off, so they hooked him up with a mechanical one. Now that you know, we can get back to the story. Both Wisa and Gord crossed the kitchen and started helping Eam cook. I wish they would hurry up and eat. This is making me so hungry I could just demolish a full English. In fact, just let me out of this booth a second. I'm just going to get some grub and I'll be back in a second. Oh, sorry about that, guys. I had to feed my rumbling tummy. It was driving me mad, all this talk of food. Anyway, back to the story. The guys assembled the perfect breakfast and all sat down to tuck in. It was beastly hearing them chow down. They really sounded like monsters. It was even worse when they drank their tea. There was no etiquette at all. Just listen. They all licked their plates clean and gave a big
That was lovely.
right at the spot, that. They sat for a moment, nearly lapsing into a food coma. Gord peered over at Eam, and before he spoke, Gord could see Eam's eyes start to sparkle back to life. Hey, Gord, guess what?
What?
Me and Wisa have a new car.
Oh, wow, can we go for a ride?
Why do you think we've come here? We've come for you. Come with me if you want to live. The group quite sluggishly rose from their seats, put their plates into the dishwasher and headed for the door. Where's your mum and that diddly derp? Eam was referring to Gord's sister Polly and mother Mildred.
They've gone to Nanan's or shopping or something. I don't know, I'm not sure.
Meh, no worries, my God. We will leave them a note. Eam scribbled a note saying Gordon was with them, and with that they all headed for the door. Upon opening the door, they beheld the new car Eam had just bought. It was a small 4x4. It looked like it would be fun to take on a safari. It was silver with 4 seats and a sunroof.
I'm gonna call it the Silver Surfer. Come on then, let's go for a ride.
The 3 of them hopped inside, and Eam turned the ignition key, and the 4x4 roared to life and was ready to roll. They set off with a jolt and boomed down the country lane, taking in the sounds, smells, and sights.
So, where did you get this car, Eam?
Well, it's quite a long, weird, but quite cool story. My last car was literally on its last legs and had just died, so we needed something new and something quick, and naturally I asked around but wasn't impressed with what we were seeing until I asked my dad, who just so happened to have a friend that was selling this weird 4x4, so I thought I'd go and check it out. Now, The guy who was selling it said he'd bought it from this professor guy. I don't know how true this is, but he said that this guy was renowned for helping with the space rockets or shuttles or something, and it was rumoured that he would modify his cars, so this may be just a hidden gem. There might be a few surprises that we've not even found yet. Gordon looked amazed and started looking around the car for anything out of place, but alas, everything looked normal. He wondered if Eam's story about the professor was true. He thought maybe the guy just told him that to sell the car. All Gordon found was the usual buttons that opened the windows. How frustrating, but never mind, Gordon thought. He would just sit there and enjoy the ride. Hey, wait, what's this button in the centre console? Which? This with the weird symbol on it. I have absolutely no idea. Push it. Weiss pushed the button and they didn't expect to be boosted forward at breakneck speed. Eam only just managed to keep the car straight, and it's a good job they were on a road with no other cars on it. Push it again! Weiss pressed the button again and it popped out and the car decelerated, returning to normal speed. Wow, that uses quite a lot of fuel. We need to go fill up now, and don't press it again. Gordon was amazed and reinvigorated, so he decided the story must have been true, and the car may reveal other weird and wonderful functions, so he began his search for more buttons. After 10 minutes, he gave up and decided to just relax.
Eam, does this thing go off-road?
Eam stopped the car and turned to Gordon. All I can say is, where we're going, we don't need roads. Gordon knew that that was a quote from a famous movie, but he couldn't remember what it was. Can you? Eam turned the wheel to face the field at the side of them and pushed his foot down on the gas pedal. Let's take a shortcut to the petrol station. The car glided with ease through the field. It was made for this kind of thing, and you could tell. Uh-oh, God.
No, I know one of you farted.
I bet you can't guess who.
That proper stinks.
Must be the full English. Crack the windows down. They each pushed their automatic window switches and the windows opened, allowing the foul stench to escape. Wisa decided to use her chapstick, which she had in her bag, so she pulled it out, and as she was about to apply it to her lips, the car ran over a rock and it sent everyone into the air. The seat belts were the only saving grace as they anchored the gang into their seats. The chapstick Wisa had in her hand was launched into the air and then onto the floor and rolled behind her seat to Gordon's feet.
Get me my chapstick, please, Gordon.
Reaching down to his feet, Gordon fumbled for the chapstick and noticed his fingers brushed past something attached to the chair, and Gordon began to do what Gordon does best. He decided to inspect it and pull it. What happened next was literally otherworldly. He had definitely found another one of those professor's switches and pulled it upwards into an upwards position, and it clicked. The car began to vibrate. God, did you push another switch or something?
Not exactly. I thought it was something stuck on my seat and I pulled it up and heard a click.
Just as Gordon was about to carry on talking, he and Wisa and Eam were catapulted backwards into their seats as the car launched at a ludicrous speed forwards, almost taking off, and then, boom! The car was flying along the road and the 3 occupants vanished in it. Wow, this story has just reached the next level of weird, and if you listen to our last story, you'll know my favorite word is weird. Just thought you should know. Anyway, back to the story. The car had vanished from what we consider to be our plane of existence and launched into a realm between realms, into a limbo space, a space between worlds. Unfortunately for the guys, they had all passed out as the car continued to hurtle through time and space. Without a driver at the helm, the car hurtled out of control. As Eam came round, he tried to steer the car and turned the wheel right and then passed out again. The gang were, well, unbeknown to them, on a new adventure into, well, who knows where. Gordon started to come around a little and noticed he couldn't move his arms or legs. Groggily, he started to open his eyes and was staring at a ceiling.
Oh, where am I?
Wisa, God's awake.
Good.
Gordon tilted his head and peered over to where he heard Eam and Wisa's voice. As his eyes began to adjust, he saw Eam and Wisa, who were strapped to tables as he was.
Where are we?
I don't know. All I know is I passed out and woke up here. The same with me.
Where is the car and where are we?
All I remember is you pushing that button and then it got hazy and we all woke up here, wherever here is.
Taking in their surroundings, they noticed everything was sterile and the only colour was white. Then a door could be heard opening at the back of the room and a man and a woman entered. Both in white lab-style coats, the lady had a clipboard in hand and the man a recording device. The man began speaking into his recording device as the lady took notes.
3 subjects recovered in a primitive vehicle. We scanned their DNA into our systems, and it appears that they are underground-born rebels that have obviously evaded detection up until now. They will be tagged and reassigned to Dome 3 for job designation.
Eam butted in and started to speak.
Who are you and where are we?
The scientist didn't take a blind bit of notice and walked over to a control panel on the wall and began pushing buttons. A panel in the wall opened and the lady retrieved a weird scientific-looking device. She approached Wisa first and placed the device onto her arm and pushed a button. Lisa winced and screamed for a second, and the boys started to protest by shouting, but the scientist simply proceeded to use the device on Eam and Gordon, then started talking to each other.
Subjects have been microchipped and are ready for transference to Dome 3.
The scientists then exited the room and left them all in utter shock.
I've got a feeling we're not in Yorkshire anymore. You're not kidding. I can't actually believe what's just happened. Look, I think we roll with this for the time being. Don't fight and let's see where they take us. We're obviously at the disadvantage, so we have to scope out the land and see what the deal is with this place.
Agreed.
So take a breather and ride with it, yeah?
They all relaxed for now and didn't know what to expect next. After waiting for about 15 minutes, the doors opened and 3 men with batons entered the room and went to the bedsides of each of the gang. They placed bands on each of the gang's wrists and unshackled them. When Gord, Eam and Wisa stood, the guards pulled a controller from their pockets and pushed a button. The moment the button was pushed, Gord, Eam and Wisa's hands were magnetically forced together because of the bracelets on their wrists. It was obvious that they were prisoners of this place, and the shackles proved it. None of the guards spoke. They simply pointed to the door, which swished open. The guys nodded at each other and walked in single file out of the door and were escorted down a long corridor with multiple rooms on both sides. They were marched forwards towards a big metal safe-type door. One of the 3 guards scurried in front and unlocked the bolts on either side of the door and heaved it open. The light beamed into the hall, nearly blinding our young adventurers. Once their vision adjusted, they couldn't believe what their eyes were seeing. Stepping outside, they looked up to see a clear dome. So, they were trapped in a dome. How weird. Not giving them 2 minutes to process their surroundings, the guard shoved them forward. They were being escorted to what looked like a train platform. Once they got there, they looked down the track to see a shuttle hurtling at an extremely fast speed towards them. The moment it arrived to their platform, the door swooshed open, and without warning, the guards pushed them into the shuttle and the door shut. Powering up, the little shuttle shot backwards in the direction it came from.
What on earth is happening, and where on earth are we? If we're on Earth, that is.
I don't know, but I don't like it. We haven't even had time to fart, never mind anything else. But all I can make of it is that we're enclosed in this dome-type structure, and these people are very authoritarian. I'm guessing they need us for something, but what, I haven't a clue. I think they called us rebels or something, and they've not hurt us, well, apart from that chip they put in his arm. Yeah, that hurt, and we need to get it out ASAP. I know. We'll figure it out, don't worry, but we have to keep our heads down. We are at a major disadvantage at the minute. Let's see what they want from us and figure it out from there. Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
The shuttle hurtled down the track and revealed vast landscapes at either side with no animals or humans anywhere in sight. After about 20 minutes, the shuttle went through a tunnel, and it was as if someone had turned day into night as they were plunged into pure darkness. Emerging from the tunnel, the shuttle had entered another dome which was massive. There wasn't as much light in this dome, and what light there was artificial. Peering out of the shuttle window, the gang noticed people in large numbers walking around various market stalls and going into and out of buildings. Their clothes were raggy and dirty. They all looked quite thin and fatigued as they lethargically walked around. The surroundings were dirty with rubbish scattered everywhere. In addition to all these people, there were guards patrolling. The shuttle stopped and opened. God, Eam and Wisa stepped onto the platform, and a man with a suit, tie, and a clipboard stepped forward, beginning to speak with what seemed like a line he had said 1,000 times.
3 prisoners described as rebels sent to be reassigned for work detail.
He then scribbled on his pad and raised his hand to one of the guards who brought over 3 cases. The clipboard guard handed a case to Eam, Wisa, and Gord then said,
Take them to Dormitory 56. It's now vacant after 2 residents were upgraded to Pod Titan for their years of service.
The guard nodded at the clipboard guard, and he sprang into action, pushing the gang forward through the streets. The residents looked at our guys and sniggered. They marched through the sea of people until they reached a large building. The guard then started to speak with them. Your room is 56 and work detail information is in cases given. Complete the work and you will have a chance to upgrade to Pod Titan after years of service. That is all. The guard withdrew a controller from his pocket and pushed a button which released their bracelet cuffs. Then he left them each holding their cases, baffled.
Come on, let's get into this room where we have to stay and open these cases.
The gang opened the door to the building and walked to an elevator with the room's display on it. They got in and pushed 56. Shaking and rumbling, the elevator shot upwards. It sounded like it was a laboured effort as the elevator squealed upwards and finally stopped. The door halfway opened and the gang didn't mess about. They leapt out as the elevator shot back down. Their room was directly in front of them, number 56. They went over and noticed there wasn't any door handle and were perplexed as to what to do next. All they could see was a small panel at the side of the door. Gordon stepped forward.
I've watched enough sci-fi films to know what to do now.
Little Gord swiped his bracelet across the panel and the door swooshed open, revealing a rather small room with a toilet in the corner, 2 beds, and a single sink.
Well, if this doesn't look like a prison cell, I don't know what is.
This is great. Looks like we're all just going to have to squidge in and not look when the other one's on the toilet. We'll figure it out.
Let's have a look at these cases then.
The cases didn't have a visible latch or lock either, so going off of what Gordon had just done with the room door, they each swiped their bracelets over the top of the cases and they clicked open. Inside Wisa's case was a maid-style uniform with a single sheet of paper inside that simply stated Cook, Cleaner, Childcare for Family Davenport. Gord was the next. His suit looked like overalls and a paper that stated Quarry Miner. Eam was next and was surprised to have had the same uniform and assignment as Gordon. They were all shocked, scared, angry, perturbed, frustrated, enraged. Any negative emotion was running through their heads and in their hearts and in their stomachs too. Not knowing what to say or do next, the gang decided to hunker down and get some sleep and see how the events would unfold tomorrow. They pushed the 2 single beds together and all huddled together, trying to keep warm and get some kind of sleep. They managed about an hour of sleep throughout the entire night, and just as they drifted off, a horrendous alarm screeched out. They jolted awake and looked towards the door, which had a phrase flashing on it. It stated, "Report to station for work detail."
Oh, come on, guys, let's get these uniforms on and find out what we can.
They got dressed quickly and headed for the door and down the elevator. The moment they got outside, they noticed people queuing to get into the shuttle trains that were pulling into the station. Taking a look at the uniforms of the other people, they knew where they were going, so Wisa joined the other maids and Eam and Gord the quarrymen. Nobody spoke as they walked towards the shuttle. Gord and Eam managed to cram themselves into the quarry shuttle and had to leave Wisa as she got on board with one of the maid shuttles. "Oh, I hate it when they get separated. It's so annoying." The shuttles went off in different directions. So, who shall we follow first? Wisa or the boys? Sorry if it sounds like I'm on the toilet. That's just my thinking noise. Let's follow Gord and Eam to the quarry first. Eam and Gordon were surrounded by men who looked like their souls had been broken, not a smile amongst them. The shuttle rocketed down the track and approached another tunnel, which again plunged them into darkness for a few minutes and emerged into another dome. The surroundings were a gritty orange colour, like the colour of that, what do they call it when they put it on a grit, I'd already said it, a gritty orange colour with mountains and rocks all around. Sand blew all over the place, and just looking outside made the boys thirsty. It looked like the surface of Mars. The shuttle screeched to a halt and the doors opened, releasing the prisoners. They marched out, heading towards a huge pile of sledgehammers of varying sizes. Grabbing a hammer, each of the boys followed the prisoners to a huge quarry, and they all started to break rocks down with their hammers. After about 3 hours, a whistle blew and the prisoners shuffled into a queue, waiting for something. A man carrying a barrel filled with something on his back waltzed towards the prisoners, who opened their mouths. This is getting a little bit strange. Insert my favourite word. Weird, yes, weird. The man with the barrel reached behind his head and retrieved a hose with a gun attached to the end. He then pointed it towards the prisoners and pulled the trigger. Eam and Gordon closed their eyes as they thought this was the end, and after hesitation they opened their eyes again and saw the guards spraying water into the prisoners' mouths. They sighed and waited for their turn as they were very dehydrated. After taking a few mouthfuls, the prisoners scattered and the guards spoke. 30-minute break, then back to work. Everyone gathered into a corner as far from the guards as possible and collapsed onto the floor to rest. Eam tried to speak to one of the group.
Hey, you! Listen! Please, listen, just talk to me. Look, I'm new here. I just need some information. Please, I don't know what's going on. Please!
They dismissed him immediately. He gave up and turned to Gordon, shrugging his shoulders. After a minute or two, one of the prisoners got up and plonked himself next to Eam and Gordon.
You boys look new around here. It's nice to meet you. My name is Abe. I'm a redesignated rebel. They captured me a few days ago. They're always looking for members of the resistance. I guess you boys were once free, like me, too.
Yeah, we were, and haven't a clue what this place is. We aren't from here.
Well, now, let me put things into some kind of perspective for y'all, so you can better understand the situation you've walked into. You are currently in Pod Quarry, where all the prisoners go to work and break rocks. You see, our world consists of 4 domes that house the entirety of humanity. One dome is for us. They say it's not a prison population, but it obviously is. I call them the slave dome. One's for the upper class or oligarchic population, and one for food and water, and the final pod for technology and science, where they like to experiment on things, including us. This is the way our world works, and the only thing keeping us going is the false promises of these oligarchs. They offer freedom and prosperity for anyone who is hard-working and puts in years of service to further their cause. I personally believe that's a load of bull spit, but you can't tell any of these otherwise. Now they put videos on the screens to show others who are in the pod of the oligarchs. It's called Pod Titan, or you can call it the oligarch pod, and have the ideal dream life, but they can be falsified with their AI technology, you see. I don't believe them for 1 minute. The powerful families all live in the oligarch pod, with Davenport being one of the head families.
Gordon and Eam's faces and stomachs dropped as they remembered the assignment that Wisa was given was Davenport. They were anxious, to say the least. So let's hold it there for a second and rewind time a little bit to when Wisa, Eam and Gordon were about to get onto the shuttles and follow Wisa this time and see how she got on. Wisa boarded the shuttle and watched Eam and Gordon get on the quarry shuttle, which shuttled off in the opposite direction to her. She was on her way to the oligarch pod, or Pod Titan. The shuttle boomed along the track and went through a tunnel again, plunging everything into pure darkness. When the shuttle emerged, it was as if night turned into day. The oligarch, or Titan pod, was beautiful. The sun was shining, grass, lush and dark green, and the entire place gave a different feeling to the prisoner dome. The landscape brightened Wisa's mood, but it was quickly brought back to earth when she remembered the horrendous conditions in the other dome. How could people live here and not feel guilty for their fellow humans who were suffering? It's beyond me. It was the classical upper and lower class situation, divide and rule, divide and conquer, so Wisa needed to figure out who divided the people and why.
As the shuttle began slowing, Wisa noticed a huge mansion estate house coming into view. The shuttle stopped outside the grounds of this huge house, and door opened so they all got out. All Wisa could do was follow the other two maids to the house and tried talking to them, but they wouldn't answer. One of them looked to have been beaten up as she had black eyes. Very weird. They went around the mansion to the back and down some stone steps into what Wisa could only describe as the servants' quarters. The maids pointed at the mop and prodded Wisa. So, taking the hint, Wisa grabbed the mop and put cleaning supplies in the bucket and began to mop the floor. The other two maids exited the room, leaving Wisa on her own to mop the huge chessboard-style floor. As she was about 3/4 of the way through, the door which connected to the main house opened and a tall, thin, but quite muscular gentleman walked in. He had a ginger moustache and was very pale in complexion. His jaw was quite large and he walked with an air of arrogance. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a silver cigar tube and a lighter. He walked uncomfortably close to Wisa and held the tube in front of her face and opened it, taking out quite a large cigar. Placing the cigar in his mouth, he lit it with the lighter. Wisa stood frozen, looking at the floor. Once he lit the cigar, he blew the smoke into Wisa's face, which she found infuriating, but she held her temper in. He smiled and then began speaking.
So you're the fresh meat in town, huh? I only have the best to work for me, and if you're a good girl, you will be rewarded. But if you misbehave, you will be punished. I am sorry, where are my manners? Let me introduce myself. My name is, well, to you, Mr. Davenport. I am the owner of this house and head member of the Leaders' Council. We provide food, water, and oxygen for the poor folk. I mean for you. We give you life, and in return we live here in Dome Titan. Our technology allows us all to exist inside the domes our forefathers created to shield us from the hazardous environment outside. We're doing a duty and keep peace with an iron fist. Nobody, and I mean nobody, will disobey our commands. And besides, if you work hard enough, you can be upgraded in a few short years and live the rest of your days here in Titan with us. You have been chosen to be my personal maid and address my every desire. Today cleaning, and tomorrow you will take care of my son, Henry, as his last nanny was upgraded and lives here, on Titan, on the outskirts, a fate you could have if you serve well.
He then looked Wisa up and down and then took a huge drag of his cigar and blew it into her face. It was as if he was trying to bait a reaction from Wisa, but she remained firm. Bless her little soul. A grin widened across his face as he tapped the cigar ash onto the clean floor in yet another attempt to rattle Wisa. Then, after an awkward pause, he turned on his heels, sniggered, and left the room. Wisa cleaned the ash up quickly, then sat on a stool in the corner awaiting her next task. The two maids came back in and walked up to Wisa with a piece of paper in hand. It was a list of chores that needed to be done by the end of their shift, and when I say it was a list, it was like letting a toilet roll unfold. It was a mile long. The three of them got to work polishing ornaments, hoovering carpets, dusting light fittings, washing pots and pans and toilets too. Hours flew by and a beep sounded to signify the end of their shift. Wisa was very fatigued and couldn't wait to get back to the boys. The three maids took one bottle of water each off of the side and drank it fast, placing the empty bottle in the bin, and then they headed for the shuttle. Now Eam and Gordon's shift was also finished, so they all headed back to the room to rest, regroup, and plan for the days ahead. Gordon and Eam arrived fatigued at the room, and then shortly after Wisa joined them. The door swooshed closed, and a bleeping noise sounded as a panel on the wall opened with 3 plates of food and bottles of water. The gang dug in.
This is disgusting. This is worse than pig swill, this stuff. Ugh.
I know, God, but get it eaten anyway. We may not get anything else for a while.
So they each cleaned their plates and placed them back inside the panel on the wall, and it closed. They all swapped stories and filled each other in about their experiences.
I don't like the sound of that Davenport guy. He sounds like a right jerk. He was. He's full of himself and seems to have it out for me for some reason. Well, grin and bear it, love, for now. We've got to figure out how to get out of this place and get back home.
We need a plan. But what?
Well, I was thinking, you know that guy at the quarry? He mentioned a resistance, so there's obviously people who disagree with all of this stuff, and they're on the other side, so we could do some digging and try and find them, as they're obviously opposed to all this oligarch crap. Yeah, I think that's the best thing to do, and I'll see if I can get any info on the Davenports.
Agreed.
Agreed.
They finally had somewhat of a game plan, and so with that they all decided to call it a night. Upon waking, they went to the hatch in the wall, and it opened with 3 bottles of water and 3 apples.
Oh, we're going to be pretty run down with this lack of calories, but we'll just have to make do.
They each took an apple and ate nearly everything except for the pips and stalk. After swigging the water down, they got dressed and headed out of the door to their assigned job detail. Now, let's follow Eam and Gord again, shall we, to the quarry first? The boys entered the shuttle and were on their way to the quarry whilst Wisa went in the opposite direction to the oligarch dome. The boys' shuttle shot through the tunnel and into the dirty quarry. They dismounted the shuttle and headed for the pile of breaking hammers, then followed the other men to the rocks. Then they started hammering away as a guard waltzed past, making sure everything was normal. They worked for what seemed like forever, then the 30-minute drink break was called. Eam and Gordon went over to the group of men and straight up to Abe to quiz him about the resistance.
Abe, can you let us in on how to contact the resistance?
Shh, they might hear you. Listen, come close. You boys look like good men, and we would love to have you on our side. Look, my contact is gonna extract me any day now, and if you like, you can come along with me and get away from this hellhole and go underground with the real, honest people. What do you say?
Well, we definitely want out of this place, but we have one more in our party, a woman called Wisa. Can she come too?
A woman, you say? How interesting. I'm sure they can extract all of us. Listen, I'll talk to my contact and set it up and let you know tomorrow, okay?
Yeah, great.
And with that, the boys gave a sigh of relief. They were finally going to get away from this dump and try to figure out a way home. Now I'm going to say one of my favorite words. Are you ready? Meanwhile, in the oligarch dome, Wisa was babysitting the Davenport's 6-year-old son, Henry. Wisa had been put on babysitting duty and was told she must make sure that the young master was washed, dressed, and prepped for the day. Wisa had helped dress him and noticed he was extremely quiet and hadn't spoken a word to Wisa the whole time. She thought it was because she was new and he must have been shy. After he was dressed, he gestured to his stomach, and Wisa thought he must be hungry, so she took his hand and escorted him to the kitchen. Henry opened the fridge and took out some sort of energy bar and opened it. Putting the bar in his mouth, he chomped on it and made really short work of it. Then something horrific happened. Henry's face began to swell and he struggled to breathe. Wisa thought he must have had an allergic reaction to the food, so she acted as fast as she could and shouted for help. One of the other maids came in and saw the boy sprawled on the floor, struggling to breathe. She immediately dashed over to a phone on the wall and picked up the receiver and said,
"We need a doctor now. It's Henry. He's having a reaction."
The maid slammed the phone down and rushed to Henry and cradled his head whilst Wisa held his hand. The doctor rushed in with a bag in hand and leant down to Henry. He took out a small device from his pocket and placed it on Henry's arm.
Administering anti-allergy medication.
Then, in a few short seconds, Henry's breathing became easier and the swelling went down.
What did you allow him to eat, you stupid maid? This will be on the report sheet, and you will lose your food privilege for the day.
Wisa couldn't believe what had just transpired. It seemed like a dream. The doctor exited and the maid took Henry upstairs to his room. Wisa looked at the list of duties on the board on the wall and decided to carry on and not get into any more trouble. After about an hour, the maid came back into the room and told Wisa that Mr. Davenport wanted to see her in his study ASAP. So Wisa went upstairs and looked for Mr. Davenport's study. She knocked on multiple doors until she heard, "Enter." So she did. Mr. Davenport was sat behind a huge leather-topped desk with a stern look on his face. He refrained from speaking and opened a box on his desk which contained cigars. He plucked one out and opened his desk drawer, producing a matchbox. He threw the box onto the table.
"Maid, light my cigar now."
Wisa had had just about enough, but she kept her cool and walked over, picking up the matches and opening the box. Picking out a match, she struck it on the side of the box, and as the flame sprang to life, she quickly put it to Mr. Davenport's cigar. He puffed away on the cigar and again blew smoke into Wisa's face.
"I'm guessing the other maids never told you about Henry's allergies."
"No, sir."
"Typical. You see the maid with the black eyes?"
"Yes."
"She allowed my son to eat something he shouldn't and paid the price. I punished her for her insolence, and I will do the same to you if you ever let my son come to harm again. Do I make myself clear?"
"Yes, sir."
"Now come over here."
"What? Why?"
"Do not speak to me, maid. I said come here now, or there will be consequences."
Wisa was quite perturbed at the request and felt extremely anxious. She knew that he was a horrible man, but felt powerless, so she walked around the table, and Mr. Davenport stood tall, shadowing over her. He grabbed Wisa's face with a claw-like grip.
"You think I was gonna let you get out of here without being punished?"
He threw Wisa onto the table and pinned her down. Wisa was in full fight-or-flight mode, and she needed to get out of this situation fast. Mr. Davenport lowered his face to Wisa and said,
"This is simply a warning. Next time you will be sent to the science pod for study, and we all know what that means."
He still had the cigar in his mouth, and the ash dropped into Wisa's hair. Holding Wisa down, he stared into her eyes.
"It's only because I like you.
that you weren't punished. Now, get out of my sight, maid."
He released Wisa and she quickly darted off. Luckily, her shift was over, so she rushed to the shuttle and back to the room where she would be reunited with Eam and Gordon. The moment she walked into the room, she ran into Eam's arms and told him what had happened. To say Eam was in full-blown rage mode was an understatement, and Gordon too. The hatch in the wall opened and only 2 meals and 2 bottles of water appeared.
"Here, Wisa, you can share ours."
Because of the events of the day, Wisa had had her rations taken from her.
Well, the day wasn't a total loss. I managed to swipe this from the doctor's bag when he was treating Henry.
"What is it?"
It's some sort of medical device. I thought it may come in handy.
Good old sly Wisa. Oh, Wisa, you do amaze me and surprise me sometimes. You're just simply fantastic. I do love you to pieces. Anyway, back on with the story.
Why, you hairy little thief. Anything is a plus at the minute, to be honest.
Come on, let's get some kip and see what tomorrow brings.
The accumulation of fatigue was more present today than ever as they all fell straight asleep. The next morning the annoying tone sounded to wake them up.
Oh, why hasn't this thing got a snooze button? Oh, 5 more minutes.
They had to drag their weary bodies out of bed and waited for the hatch in the wall to drop open and give them their morning rations. After they ate, they quickly got dressed and were ready to go. Wisa went straight to the maid queue and the boys to the quarry. This time we will follow Wisa to the Davenport's house. Both shuttles were filled and shot off in opposite directions. Wisa sighed as they approached the tunnel. Then, to Wisa's surprise, all of a sudden one of the maids huddled close to her.
I have heard Mr. Davenport likes you and wants to make you his head maid. Oh dear. His last favorite maid disappeared after she refused to complete all of her tasks. He tells people that she was upgraded, but we all know she was sent to the science pod for experimentation. I wanted to give you some advice if you want to stay out of trouble. Please do anything he says, or you will be punished, and he will not hesitate to send you away too. I have noticed you are a good worker and manage to complete all your tasks, which is good, and oh, by the way, my name is Bella. Nice to meet you, Bella. My name's Wisa, and thanks for the advice. It's much appreciated. I'll do my best to keep my head down.
The shuttle abruptly stopped outside the Davenport's estate. They got out and went to the kitchen quarters to start the day's tasks. Half an hour in, and Mr. Davenport entered smoking a cigar again. The maids jolted and rushed to the center of the room, with Wisa being the last in line.
Today we will be, let me correct myself, you will be preparing a dinner for a number of guests from the other estates, and I need you maids to prep everything and do as the cook says. You won't be returning to your dormitories tonight. You will remain here, and the chef will make you a meal. You will be on table and coat service until the dinner comes to a close, and then you will wait in the old servants' quarter rooms and be on standby if you are needed. Now, this dinner is going to be very important, and if any one of you messes anything up, there will be hell to pay. Do I make myself clear?
The maids each nodded. Mr. Davenport then proceeded to walk down the line of maids with a sadistic smile crossing his face. He walked all the way down the line very uncomfortably close to all the maids, and when he got to Wisa, he blew smoke in her face again. He's starting to annoy me now. Wisa had already seen this coming, so she had held her breath. Then he walked out with an arrogant air about him. The moment the door shut behind him, Wisa gasped for air.
Oh, we have so much work to do before the big dinner. Let's get to work.
Meanwhile, in the quarry dome, Gord and Eam were breaking down the usual rocks, awaiting for any message from Abe. All the quarrymen looked knackered and were ready for a drinks break. As the drinks break approached, they all took their rations of water and went to the usual spot to lay down and rest. Gord and Eam were at the front, and they were just about to sit down when a boulder fell from the top of the quarry wall. It was headed straight for Gordon. Eam, trying to act as fast as he possibly could, pushed Gordon, but the boulder grazed all the way down Gordon's arm as he shrieked in pain. Gordon then passed out, and one of the guards came over to inspect what had gone on. Eam scooped up our little bro in his arms and rushed back towards the shuttle, pleading for help from the guards.
Please help him. Get some help, please. Look, he's in pain. Please help him. I don't know what to do. Where do I go? Can't you see that he's hurt?
And?
I'm taking him back to the domicile.
Very well. At least his body won't get in our way.
The guard allowed Eam to pass and get onto the shuttle, and it shot off back to their domicile. Eam rushed Gord into the room and tore some of the bedding sheets up and mopped up the blood of his wounds. Then he remembered the medical device Wisa had stolen. It was hidden under the bed, so without hesitation, Eam grabbed the device and stuck it onto Gordon's arm.
Vitamin and mineral depletion protocol initiated. Also, wound healing serum administered.
The little device was flashing away as it gave Gordon assistance. Eam waited with bated breath to see if the little machine could help Gordon.
Protocol 100% effective and completed. Please remove.
Eam grabbed the device, and lo and behold, Gordon opened his eyes and took a deep breath. Oh, I am so relieved.
What happened?
You were in a little accident, Gordon. I got you out here and used that little medical thing Wisa stole on you. Oh, I'm so glad it worked because you were in a real tack-in. Oh, there was quite a bit of blood. That's why your arm's wrapped up in that bed quilt.
But my arm feels fine.
Gordon raised his arm with no effort above his head and pulled the makeshift bandage off. To Eam's surprise and amazement, the arm looked as good as new.
Well, I reckon you still keep it wrapped up for when we go back to the quarry because you don't want to attract any undue attention. They all thought you were really injured.
I feel great and a bit more awake than yesterday, to be honest.
Well, I think the medical device has pumped you up a bit.
After all the commotion, they noticed the time and wondered where Wisa was. And with that, we will whisk you back to the story in the Oligarch Dome with Wisa and the Davenports. Where did we leave off? Oh, yes, she was made to stay to prep for this big family assembly dinner thingy where the higher families gathered to discuss any updates. Wisa had been put on a potato peeling duty with 500 to peel before doing the carrots. Oh, my goodness, her hands are going to ache tomorrow. Her hands were so sore and she was so fed up, but she had to persist at least for now. After about 3 hours of peeling, polishing and cleaning, the maids were allowed 30 minutes to eat and drink. They each gobbled the food down and swigged the water and had 50 minutes to rest before setting off again. The second their 30 minutes were up, they all sprang back into action and made sure they were smartly dressed and clean, ready for the guests. They all went to the front door in preparation for the guests. The huge wooden doors opened and the guests started to flood in and threw their coats at the maids and expected them hung up in the cloakroom. After ticking the final guest off the register, they went straight back to the kitchen to help serve the 3-course meal. The dinner was served and the families ate in silence, which was quite bizarre and really weird. It felt really, really awkward to Wisa. The very moment the last guest had placed their knife and fork down, the maid swooped in to clear everything up. When they got into the kitchen, the maids scraped the food onto a large plate that was left and shared it amongst themselves as they saw it as an extra meal. Wisa didn't mind and took her share as they all tucked in. When they were finished, they went to the servants' quarters and could sleep if they wanted, but had to be ready at a moment's notice if the bell rang, as they would be on standby if needed. Wisa decided she was going to stealthily sneak back into the kitchen and see if she could listen to anything the top families were saying. She proceeded slowly and cautiously into the kitchen, which was almost in pure darkness. Thin rays of light came from the serving hatch and the door frames. That was all. Wisa grabbed a spoon and used it to pry open the serving hatch, oh so steadily and oh so carefully and cautiously, so she could spy on the dinner table. She managed to open it just enough to see into the room. Mr. Davenport was stood with a glass of whiskey in one hand and, yes, of course, you guessed it, a cigar in the other.
My dear friends, I am so glad that you were able to make it here today for the family assembly. It is with great pleasure that I have the opportunity to update and inform you of our advances. As you all know, we have been working on a few surprises, and today we will reveal the fruits of our labors.
Mr. Davenport then raised his glass high, which was followed by all the guests at the table. After they took a sip, a door at the back of the room opened and a worker was thrust in.
Ah, here's our special guest, a super hard worker from the prison dome.
The families on the table clapped as the man, bewildered and puzzled, marched in.
Come over here, my good man.
The prisoner walked over to Mr. Davenport.
Why, don't be afraid, young sir. This is a glorious day for you and for us all. We have decided that after all of your hard work, you are to be upgraded to our dome. You will be treated like a king after all your hard years of service.
The prisoner's eyes filled with tears and he smiled.
Now, sir, we have an initiation process that all new members must abide by.
The prisoner nodded and looked extremely thankful.
All you have to do, sir, is to stand here with this blindfold on while we read a declaration to declare you as one of us.
The man nodded in agreement and was blindfolded. Mr. Davenport walked over to a side cabinet and opened a drawer on the bottom and reached in. He withdrew what looked like a gun weapon and aimed it at the prisoner. A smile crossed his face, and he pulled the trigger. To Wisa's horror, the man with the blindfold turned into ash, and dust went everywhere. The table went into waves of laughter and clapping while Wisa gasped and couldn't believe the evil she had just witnessed. Mr. Davenport put the weapon away and started addressing the guests again.
Not bad for a prototype, huh? You see, we have been advancing our weaponry as well as cultivating alternative ways to manufacture food. Why, look down. The meals you all ate today were all genetically modified from our greenhouses, all designed to make you feel fuller for longer and deliver all the nutrients you need. With that being said, I'm now opening the floor to questions.
Wisa had had enough and decided to go back to the servants' quarters. She went in and cuddled up on the bed with her little heart fluttering inside her chest, keeping her awake. It was barbaric what she had just witnessed, and she wanted to go back home to Yorkshire now. After the maids had got settled down, a bell rang for them to get the guests' coats and clear the rest of the table and clear up the mysterious dust on the floor. Oh, dear. As soon as this was done, they all went back to the maids' quarters, followed by Mr. Davenport. Of course, he has to rub things in and be a total jerk. He again singled out Wisa and walked up to her. He was quite drunk and had an overwhelming scent of booze.
For a new maid, you have served me well, and I thank you, but I couldn't forget that you nearly killed my boy, so I thought I'd repay the favor, and well, you'll find out tomorrow when you return home. Oh, yes.
Wisa went into meltdown with sweat forming on her forehead. What did he mean? Was Eam and Gordon okay? She began to panic internally, but externally looked unshaken. Mr. Davenport turned on his heel, sniggering, and exited the room. Wisa couldn't sleep. I mean, would you be able to sleep if you thought that something had happened to Eam or Gord? Oh, I know I couldn't. So she just simply laid there awake, allowing the thoughts to circle in her mind. They had a full day of work before then, and Wisa kept her head down, trying to will the time to speed up so she could be reunited with the boys. Hours upon hours passed, and then finally the bell rang and they went to the shuttle to get back to their dormitories. With all the vigour she could muster, she ran through the streets to reach their room and open the door. The moment she did, Eam and Gordon jumped up and they all embraced with a huge bear hug. Eam, Wisa and Gordon swapped stories.
So by the looks of it, this Davenport guy tried to hurt Gord. He doesn't let things go, does he? And it wasn't even your fault what happened to his boy. You didn't even know he was allergic. I'm just so glad that medical device came in handy and you're both okay.
We can't carry on living here. Tomorrow, we have to get back in touch with that Abe guy and try to find this resistance. It's ridiculous, this.
With that, they all fell asleep. Upon waking, they went about their usual routine.
Oh, I wish we had something to brush our teeth. Mine feels so furry.
Tell me about it.
Then the food hatch sprang open, producing fruit and water. They tucked in, and each one had a large apple. Gord bit a massive chunk from his apple.
Well, what's this?
Gordon pulled a small piece of paper from his mouth. It had some writing on it. We will extract you tonight. Destroy this message.
Wow, so Abe wasn't kidding when he said they could get us all out of here.
I can't wait.
Me either.
Gordon ripped the message up and threw it into the toilet and flushed it. With the hope of escape, they all went about their days with a renewed sense of vigour and enthusiasm. After another repetitive, fatiguing day, they dragged themselves back to the room and awaited somebody coming for them. The door burst open, and in walked none other than, yes, you guessed it, it was Mr. Jerk himself, Mr. Davenport, and he was accompanied by 2 guards which had 2 batons. Oh, what next?
Nice to meet you, boys. You will be coming with me now. Do you really think that the resistance was gonna come and rescue you? We've been watching you for some time, and now we intercepted the paper message you flushed down the toilet. We filter everything here so as to make sure that everybody obeys and to minimize anybody trying to escape to the resistance. I can't have that now, can I? So, as a punishment, we're going to take a ride to the Science Dome and straighten you folk out. Don't worry. We'll make you good citizens.
Our 3 adventurers were shocked, to say the least, and didn't know what to do.
Now, this little discrepancy can be forgiven if you simply give me some information.
Information about what? What do you want?
Aha, tough one, I see. Let me ask you a question.
Who said you could speak?
One of the guards punched Eam in the stomach, sending him onto the bed. He totally sucker-punched him, which was simply bad form and a sign of a true bad guy.
Ha 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 ha!
Eam got up and stared at Mr. Davenport, which he didn't expect. Rage filled in Mr. Davenport's eyes as he couldn't believe Eam took a blow and simply got back up so quickly. So Mr. Davenport signalled the guard. Another blow was administered to Eam's stomach, but this time it was with a baton, which knocked the air out of Eam's lungs.
Now that you have finished speaking, I will finish what I was going to say, and if I'm interrupted again, there will be trouble. As I was saying before, you can make all this go away if you tell me how the vehicle we found you in works. Now, you may speak.
Eam, Wisa, and Gordon exchanged a concerned glance.
It's not a matter of telling you. We would have to show you how it works. We got here by accident.
I'm afraid that will not suffice. To show you that I am deadly serious, we need to up the stakes, I see.
The gang looked at each other and were puzzled as to what he was babbling on about. Mr. Davenport grabbed Wisa and threw her onto the bed with an almighty force and jumped on top of her, pinning her down. He then signalled the guards with his head.
Oh, I do love when I get to get my hands dirty. It gives me a great pleasure. God, get me one of my cigars and light it up.
The guard put his baton away and placed a cigar in Mr. Davenport's mouth, struck a match, and lit it.
Now then, are you going to tell me how it works, or does your wife burn?
Eam stared at Wisa and she shook her head.
I will be so generous, and I will give you 10 seconds.
He started counting down, and as every second passed, the cigar in his mouth drew closer to Wisa's forehead.
9, 8, 7.
Eam looked into Wisa's lagoon-blue eyes and nodded, to which she did the same, and Gordon knew what was going to happen next.
6, 5, 4, 3.
The countdown continued, and as he reached 3, Wisa's knee, with the swiftness of a hawk, launched in between Mr. Davenport's legs. Straight in the old family jewels. Good show, Wisa. Obviously, Mr. Davenport screamed, opening his mouth wide, and the cigar fell out, narrowly avoiding Wisa's face. Eam sprang into action, and so did Gord, as the guards scrambled in panic, as nobody ever challenged an oligarch, and they weren't trained in combat. They just hit people with batons, the fools. As the guards fumbled to get their batons from their belts, Eam power-punched them and knocked them out cold. Unbeknownst to Eam, Mr. Davenport had withdrew a knife from his belt and launched for Eam's back.
Eam, look out!
Eam span around and didn't have much time to counter, so he raised his arm to shield himself from the knife. Unfortunately, it was to Eam's detriment, as the knife plunged through Eam's forearm, and Mr. Davenport smiled with a sinister grin. The smile quickly dropped from Mr. Davenport's face, as he couldn't believe Eam wasn't screaming in pain.
Ha ha! Went through my mechanical arm, you idiot!
Gord did his classical move of crouching behind Mr. Davenport's legs as Eam punched him with his free hand, and he went flying backwards over Gordon. He was out cold.
Come on, let's get a move on. I'm pretty sure they're going to be round soon, and more guards will be on the way after us. Let's make a run for it. Come on, guys, let's go.
So the trio darted out of the room and went down the elevator. When the elevator doors opened, there were 5 men dressed all in black from head to toe. They held what looked like an old gun at Eam, Gord, and Wisa's face. The gang couldn't do anything but comply with the 5 silent men and were ushered into a small van-style vehicle. Then the men in black put bags over Eam, Gordon, and Wisa's heads and tied their hands together with zip ties. The old van darted off at a tremendous speed through the streets. After about an hour's ride, they stopped and the back doors opened and our trio hopped out. They prodded Wisa, Gord, and Eam to tell them which way to walk and then held them, making them stop. All of a sudden, it felt like the earth was moving and they were on an elevator or something, as they had a familiar tickly feeling in your stomach. You know that feeling you get when the elevator goes down? I'm sure you know what I mean. It feels like butterflies in your stomach, you know. Then the moving platform came to an abrupt halt, nearly sending them to their knees. The blindfolds were now taken off of their heads, revealing a fluorescently lit underground tunnel. The 5 men marched them down the tunnel to a door at the end. Opening the door, they revealed a room full of people performing various tasks on computers, and some huddled around a central table. Eam noticed Abe standing next to a tall, thin man and a short lady.
Oh, Abe, thank you so much for rescuing us. Oh, I can't tell you the hell that we've been through. I'm guessing this is the resistance, is it?
Just as Eam was about to speak again, Abe cut him off.
You're welcome, but I'm afraid you're on your own now. It's out of my hands. I'm sorry.
Abe walked off, waving his hands in the air. What a strange man. Anyway, the thin man at the table started to speak.
So, you 3 aren't from around here, eh? Abe told me everything, but I don't quite believe it. Where's the proof? You don't have any proof. Well, hold on a second. Let's get those bands off your wrists and those chips out of your arms.
The man clicked his fingers, and a guard came over with a strange device and placed it on each of their arms, and after about a second or 2, the chip was sucked into the tube of the strange device. Then he placed a pen on the bands on their wrists, and they fell off.
Now, you can't be tracked anymore, and you can't be chained. Back to the business. I think you're lying and should be ejected from the dome for wasting our time. I think you are working with Davenport. He was spotted going into your domicile.
Yeah, but let me explain.
No talking, or else this will get messy fast. Guards, take them to the airlock.
The guards grabbed them, and no matter how much they struggled, they couldn't break free. Marching them to a door at the back of the room, the guards, accompanied by the thin man, pushed and shoved our adventurers down a very, very damp corridor until they reached a big metal door with a small porthole on it. Oh, this doesn't sound good at all, does it? They were all lined up, ready to be kicked out.
Now, I'm a fair man. This is your final chance to confess that you are, in fact, working with Davenport, or else you will be pushed out into the outer world, and we all know the air isn't breathable out there, so you might only last 30 seconds or so.
Please wait, we're telling the truth.
The thin man and his guards put an oxygen mask over their heads.
You don't understand. We hate Davenport and just want to get home to Yorkshire. We've travelled here in a car from...
Just as he was about to finish, the thin man nodded to one of the guards, who grabbed Eam, Wisa and Gordon and shoved them out of the outer door into the world outside of the dome. Oh dear! The door slammed shut behind them. Eam, Gord, and Wisa started to panic, holding their breath and beating on the big door, praying that they would let them back in, but no. Looking around as their oxygen supply diminished, they had no idea what to do next. Little Gordon's lungs were the smallest, and he couldn't hold his breath any longer and gasped for air, falling to his knees. They thought, this is it, we're done for, when God started to breathe. The air wasn't dirty or toxic at all. Wisa gasped next, and shortly after Eam did too.
Why have they done this?
The door opened and the thin man smiled, holding out his hand.
Welcome to the Resistance, and I am so sorry about this, but we needed to make sure you were genuine and not spies.
The trio were still shell-shocked and breathed in the crisp air.
You mean to say that the air is fine outside and we have nothing to worry about?
Yes, that's right. We have known this for quite some time and have tried to tell people in the domes, but Davenport and the other families put out propaganda and disinformation to make sure the people remain their slaves.
But why?
One word, my little friend. Control.
This is psychotic.
It sure is, but it helps the oligarchs to maintain power and order and their very luxurious existence.
To be honest with you, it doesn't surprise me at all. It's all the goings-on behind the curtains kind of thing. Our world is pretty much the same. There's like a scam every second. You don't know what's around the corner, but it's pretty much the same.
Speaking of your world, I'd like to make you a deal.
We're listening.
Well, we will help you to get to where you need to go back to your vehicle if you help us open these domes.
Eam looked to Wisa and Gordon for confirmation as to whether to shake hands with the king of the Resistance. They both gave a telling glance, and Eam shook his hand.
All right, you've got yourself a deal, but how are we meant to help you?
We need to get the hard drive key from Davenport's house. One of my insider maids say that he keeps everything important in a safe in his study. Once we have the hard drive, we can open the domes and reveal the world to the people.
Well, looks like we need to accomplish some kind of monumental task then, doesn't it?
That we do. Follow me.
They all went back to the computer room with the thin man.
Oh, by the way, I haven't introduced myself. My name is Ted.
Huddling around a central table, they all looked at a huge drawing of each of the domes. Eam, Gordon, and Wisa told Ted of their dealings with Mr. Davenport.
So he must be pretty angry with you and want you all skinned alive for evading his authority and kneeing him in the old family jewels. He is a man who relishes on control and torture of those he considers to be beneath him.
We need to use the element of surprise.
Definitely, you're right, young man. Now we are all fed up of living underground and want out. We want to see the sun again and feel the wind in our hair and rain on our faces to live.
I have something, but it might be a bit risky. But if you're serious about getting out of here, why not make a final stand? The guards aren't elite soldiers or anything. They're just people like you and won't put up too much resistance.
What are you getting on at?
Well, I was thinking, what if we could disguise ourselves as maids or guards to stealthily blend in and extract that hard drive without causing too much hassle?
Where is the risky part then?
Well, you see, if we get discovered, why not send the resistance, up and in to charge at the house and give us a little bit of extra time to get the hard drive? That's just a plan B. Hopefully we can sneak in, grab it and get out without any issues.
Well, seeing as you are putting everything on the line, so will we. You have a deal. You have my word. Should you get discovered, we will cause mayhem. I've spent far too many days in this underground base, and I'm not hoarding myself up and holding myself back any longer. Let's do it.
With that, Ted and Eam shook hands. Preparations got underway as the resistance brought uniforms for Wisa, Eam, and Gordon.
We will wait for nightfall, and then we will use the element of surprise and take you through the sewer system so that you can pop up in the Davenport's gardens.
They waited until night fell and then walked along a huge steel corridor of the underground until they reached a ladder. They were now situated underneath one of the gardens at the Davenport's estate. The trio climbed the ladder.
Let's try and blend in and keep your heads down. It's night time, so things should be quiet. Wisa, you will be our lead, as you know more about the house than what we do. We're basically going in blind. Okay, follow me.
They opened the drain cover and crawled over the grass to some bushes, each of them minding their every step and trying to stay undetected. Eam stood, and of course a guard was staring him directly in the eyes. What are the odds of that?
Who are you? Identify yourself.
Yes, sir. Right away, sir. Please let me get through these bushes to address you correctly, sir.
Eam was playing up to the guard. He strode through the bush and simultaneously grabbed the guard's uniform with both hands and fell backwards, intentionally doing a backwards roll, but throwing the unsuspecting guard down the manhole. The resistance members at the bottom of the drain grabbed the man and tied him up.
Well, that's one less to think about. Now let's try to be a little more stealthy, yeah?
The three adventurers stood and stayed close to the walls, trying to make their way to the back of the house to the servants' quarters. Seeing as there was no big events happening, there would be no prisoners on duty, and the house was deadly quiet. Opening the door, they each slunk into the servants' quarters. Then Wisa directed them to the kitchen, where they could hear voices coming from the dining room. Sneaking close to the serving hatch, they decided that they would listen in and did as Wisa had done before, pried the hatch open ever so slightly. Standing at the head of the table was Mr. Jerktastic himself. Yes, you guessed it, it was Mr. Davenport, surrounded by 5 of his guards.
Tonight, gentlemen, we failed to obtain the information that I need, so tomorrow we will be hunting rats. This resistance thing has gone on long enough, and to be quite frank, I'm sick to death of it. I will lead an expedition through the underground tomorrow. We will be taking some new prototype weaponry to help us eradicate the vermin. Rest up tonight. We set off early tomorrow.
The guards left, and Mr. Davenport pulled up a chair, sat down and poured a whiskey for himself, and oh yes, he did what he always does. He lit up a cigar. He puffed away and took small little sips.
Guys, I think we need to take him out, or at least tie him up. Okay, let's do it. God, grab his feet, I'll get his neck.
So Eam and Gordon snuck out of the kitchen, not making a sound, and Eam wrapped his arm around his neck and placed his hand over his mouth whilst Gordon grabbed his feet together. It was a monumental struggle, and Mr. Davenport burnt Eam's arm with the cigar, but then all of a sudden stopped dead. Raising his head, he couldn't believe what he was seeing, and neither could the boys. Wisa was holding what looked like some sort of gun at Mr. Davenport. She had remembered where it was from the big family dinner, and so thought she would give him a taste of his own medicine. Eam and Gordon let go and joined Wisa.
Guess it's my turn to torture you. I want the hard drive now, or I'll pull the trigger, and don't think I won't. Threaten my family, and you will feel my wrath.
Mr. Davenport was visibly ruffled and couldn't believe they were there in front of him. He begrudgingly nodded and walked to the stairs and went to his study with Wisa, Eam, and Gordon in pursuit. They all went into the study and watched as he took a painting off of the wall, revealing a sizable safe. Punching in a huge combination, there was a click and the safe sprang open. Mr. Davenport pulled out the hard drive and started to speak.
Now, listen to me now.
Shut it. Nobody told you to speak, did they?
Mr. Davenport's face was a picture. He was swelling with rage, but knew he was at a disadvantage and could do absolutely nothing.
Now give us the hard drive.
He placed the hard drive on the table and slid it over. Gordon walked forward and picked it up. Then, in one swift move, Mr. Davenport ducked underneath the table and pushed a button which sounded an alarm.
Ha ha! You didn't think that I'd let you get away with that drive, did you?
He then opened one of his desk drawers while hiding and rummaged around, picking up another energy weapon.
I had 2 of these made now, so the odds are even, and when my guards get here, I'll be the victor.
The guys couldn't believe what was happening. They thought they were homeward bound for sure. In a cocky move, Mr. Davenport leaped up and pointed the gun towards the trio and pulled the trigger. Eam, thinking fast, pushed Wisa and Gordon to the side, and they all barely evaded the energy blast, which blew the door behind them clean off its hinges. The guys each stood and steadied themselves.
My guards should be here at any moment. Then you are mine, and so is that drive.
The guys didn't want to stick around, so Wisa fired an energy blast at the desk, which blew it, with Mr. Davenport, backwards into the wall. Our trio then bolted for the door, trying to navigate back to the sewer system. With all the commotion, Ted and the other resistance members took that as a sign to indicate Plan B and were battling with the guards. Mr. Davenport pushed what was left of his desk off of him and pursued the guys. He fired the gun through his house, blasting paintings and plaster off of the walls. They all reached the dining room, and Wisa spun round to fire another wave at Mr. Davenport, who immediately ducked out of the way. He was hell-bent on destroying Eam and Wisa for sure. Mr. Davenport aimed at Gordon and pulled the trigger. Simultaneously, Eam pushed Gordon out of the way and the energy beam disintegrated his arm. Well, it's a good job it was the prosthetic, or should I say mechanical arm, or they would have been in serious trouble. They ran into the kitchen.
God, we've got an opportunity here, but the timing relies on you.
What?
Listen, just let me know when he gets up, and then tell me the second he gets near this door, okay?
Okay, well, he just got up and he's marching this way. He's here now!
Just as Mr. Davenport was about to push the kitchen door open, the combination of Gordon telling Eam he was there and Eam drop-kicking the door worked beautifully as it smashed Mr. Davenport in the face, knocking him clean out. Ha ha! Eam went back into the dining room where Mr. Davenport was knocked out and picked the energy weapon up. They all ran outside and saw the resistance battling the guards.
We have it! Come on, let's go!
They ran for the sewers and all piled in and shut the lid. Darkness for a moment. Then the lights flickered on. Go straight ahead. The main computer isn't far from here. They all rushed forward with adrenaline coursing through their veins. Reaching a metallic room, they saw a big computer with various slots on it. Give me the drive. They handed over the drive to Ted, who got to work plugging it in and typing various keys.
No manual override sequence completed. Open sequence initiated.
They heard deafening noises as if someone was grinding metal on metal. That was the sound of the dome opening. Now the people will know it wasn't a lie.
Great, so you're all free.
Not quite. Obviously, the oligarchs won't like this. Will probably mount some sort of defense, but they aren't hardened like the prison population, and shouldn't be too hard to overcome. Listen, we can't thank you enough for your help, and we'll hold up our side of the bargain. We will take you to your transport.
Our vehicle?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
So Ted and the gang slipped away as utter pandemonium unfolded in the domes. People thought they were all going to die, but breathed the air and rejoiced. They all began rising up and defying the guards, who soon realized they were on the wrong side anyway and joined the people. Eam, Gordon, Wisa, and Ted headed for the science cube and were met by quite a lot of men and women in white lab coats.
Access denied.
Wisa and Eam flashed the energy weapons, and the scientists waved them in and took them to the car. They got in and handed the energy guns to Ted.
Thank you for all that you've done, and I bid you all a fond farewell.
Buckling themselves in, Eam started the car and drove out of the facility.
Thank goodness we're on our way home.
I just want my bed.
I want chocolate. I fancy a cheese and bean toastie.
Oh, yeah.
Just as Eam was about to push his foot onto the accelerator, Mr. Davenport sprung from inside the boot and wrapped his arm around Eam's neck. He then pointed a knife at him. Oh, I thought all this was over.
Time for one last surprise. Now, y'all didn't think I was gonna let you simply walk away without taking me along for the ride, did you?
Eam's eyes shot to the corner and looked at Wisa, then at the button on the centre console. Wisa didn't need another hint. She pressed it and the group were thrust into their seats, including Mr. Davenport, as the car rocketed forward.
Wisa now!
At the same time, Wisa pushed the button again and Eam pumped the brakes, and Mr. Davenport shot through the front windscreen and landed on the road ahead.
Time to go off-road. Come on, guys.
Eam turned the wheel and went off-road.
The fuel light's on. Quick, God. Flick up or pull or whatever you did last time with that switch thing. Do it now.
Okay.
Gord pulled the switch and the car shot forward into the realm between realms. They were rocketed into limbo again. All the guys passed out and the car took over.
Returning to home, universe, fuel required for future leap.
The car landed in a farmer's field which was conveniently placed next to Gordon's house on the hill. They all groggily came around, and when they opened their eyes they jumped out of the car and honestly, as I'm saying it, started to kiss the ground.
Home, home, oh, sweet home.
Oh, yeah.
Then they spat out the dirt in their mouths and stood up. I told you they kissed the ground.
Well, guys, that car ride was a bit much for me. Let's get those toasties I was talking about on and a brew, and then we're all knackered. Let's get to bed. God, we're stopping here tonight because I can't be bothered to drive home.
Yeah.
Oh, they finally did it. We're back here in Yorkshire. The gang did it, and only a prosthetic arm was lost. Not too bad for a day's work. Ha ha! Oh, a happy ending. Well, I shall bid you all a good morning, or good afternoon, or good night. Thank you for listening, and if you want more stories, please like, share, subscribe, and enjoy, you beautiful people.